All right. I got the 10-minute warning as soon as I got up. By the way, I was born, since Kay was mentioning her birth and Israel's birth, I was born 3 months after Israel. To save you the math, I'm as old as Israel, give or take 3 months. And so I've never known life without an Israel. And it's a very powerful thing in a Jew's life, as it is in your life, obviously. There's so much I want to tell you. It's harder to talk for 10 minutes than it is for an hour, at least for me. So I have to get in a lot of information in this brief time. I'd like to tell you what I say to Jews. I just spoke last week to 3 large Jewish communities in South Florida for the Jewish National Fund. And a lot of these Jews, about half the Jews in the audience were Orthodox, and about half were not Orthodox or secular, supporters of Israel. And I have been telling Jews, to the extent that I've been able, because not every synagogue wants to invite me, given that I'm conservative, and that's the dividing line in Jewish life today, not Orthodox and not Orthodox, conservative and not, or conservative and liberal, unfortunately. But I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of synagogues, and I've told my fellow Jews the following. There is no way to understand Jewish history or Israel today without God. And I say this to atheist Jews, and by the way, if you're confused, how can you be an atheist Jew? And you might be, a lot of non-Jews are. Judaism is a people and a religion. So just like you could be an atheist American, you can be an atheist Jew, because it's Am Yisrael, it's the people of Israel. So I just wanted to explain how that's possible. You can't be an atheist Christian because that's a faith, but you can be an atheist Jew. Anyway, so I tell them there is only one way to understand Jewish history, and I put it to them in this way. Can you offer me a secular explanation for 2 things? The survival of the Jews? Well, 3 things. The survival of the Jews, the return of the Jews, and the hatred of the Jews. Can you offer me one secular, non-God-centered explanation for all of that? And I have never gotten one. And I know many secular Jews who are committed, very committed Jews, to Israel, for example, and to Jewish charities, and they're wonderful people, but they have no answer. And I say something that's particularly difficult to say, but I say it because I believe it. Many Jews find it difficult to believe in God after the Holocaust. Completely understandable reaction. How a good God could allow that amount of suffering. Not just murder, the suffering. The watching all of the members of your family gassed or slaughtered and raped and tortured, and then be asked to believe that there is a good God who governs the universe. I can understand why people became atheists, why some Jews did. But I've had a very different reaction, and I admit I didn't go through it, nor did any of my family. I admit that at the outset. So this is purely rational and intellectual. But my road to God is through reason. Everybody has their own road. Mine is pure reason. On a rational basis, why is Jew hatred unique? Every group on earth has been disliked by another group. The Poles don't like the Germans don't like the French, the British don't like anybody. The Russians don't like the Poles don't like the Ukrainians, the Japanese don't like the Koreans don't like the Chinese, and the Chinese don't like the Vietnamese. Anywhere you go on earth, there is bigotry, ethnic bigotry, racism, etc. But Jew hatred, poorly labeled anti-Semitism, since it has nothing to do with Semites, but Jew hatred, or anti-Semitism, is not like that. I wish Jew hatred and Israel hatred were just another bigotry. It isn't. All Jew hatred is exterminationist hatred. That's the difference. In the Haggadah, the Jewish Passover liturgy, there is a line, so it's at least 1,800 years old. Shebechol dor vador omdim aleinu lechalotenu. In every generation, someone arises to annihilate us. The Hebrew is clear, to make an end of us. Not to hate us, not to oppress us, not to persecute us, to annihilate us. Every generation, somebody will arise to annihilate us. And I give you my word, I remember vividly as a child at my father's and mother's Passover Seder table, I remember thinking, the rabbis of the ancient world were wrong. That is not true, it is over. I remember vividly thinking that. In this generation, after Auschwitz, after the Holocaust, they don't want to annihilate us anymore. That's over. And I was wrong, and the ancient rabbis were entirely right. One of the most powerful governments in the Middle East and indeed in the world, the Iranian regime, announces daily it intends to exterminate the state of Israel. Every day it announces it. Iranian and Muslim hatred of Israel is not bigotry. It's exterminationist. It's unique on earth. Jew hatred is unique. So I tell my fellow Jews as well with regard to Hitler, it doesn't make sense. Why would the most powerful country outside of America, Nazi Germany, why would it devote everything it could to annihilating the Jews? Annihilating, not enslaving. It was irrational to kill all the Jews. They would have been much more useful as slaves. Hitler took troops. Hitler took trucks. Hitler took trains to get Jews murdered. Jewish babies were an enemy. That is not explainable in secular terms. God is involved in Jewish history, or Jews and Jewish history and anti-Semitism are meaningless flukes. That's your choice. Is it a meaningless fluke, or is God involved? I'm telling you, Christians, what I tell Jews. And it's very interesting. It has an impact. I started speaking at 21 because Israel sent me to the Soviet Union because of my knowledge of Russian and Hebrew. So I smuggled in Jewish items and I smuggled out Jewish names. I went for a month when I was 20 years old, or 21 years old. And that's when I began speaking. And when I would talk to Jewish audiences in my 20s, in the 1970s, when I talked to Jewish audiences, they weren't interested in hearing about Jewish chosenness or that God is in Jewish history. Today, Jewish audiences are open to hearing it. It's a very interesting change. But you should know it too, and I think you do. And how do you explain the other phenomena? The survival of the people Israel and the return to the land of Israel. There's nothing like it on the face of the earth. There is nothing analogous. You've got to be willfully blind to deny the divine in Jewish history. Now, I understand if a Jew says, you know, God, I wish you'd choose somebody else. That's what Tevye says in Fiddler on the Roof, right? God, why don't you choose somebody else? I understand that. You know, if God just decided, you know what, I'd like to pick the Burmese this year. Just, I'll give them the Torah, make them chosen. But it doesn't work that way. And why did God choose the Jews? I started radio as the moderator of a program each Sunday night on ABC Radio in Los Angeles. For 10 years, I did this program. It changed my life. It's how I got to know Christians so well, and I really fell in love with them. I had different clergy every week, a priest, minister, and rabbi each week, and then the last 5 years of the 10 years, I had Mormons, and I had Muslims, and I had Shintoists and Buddhists, everything. One night, a guy calls up and he gives the rabbi a very hard time about Jewish chosenness. The rabbi was a liberal rabbi, and he wasn't too comfortable with Jewish chosenness either. Kept yelling at the rabbi, this is chauvinism, this is racism, you can't do this. So you gotta drop it. the rabbi said, well, to his credit, he was uncomfortable, but he didn't say we should drop it because he knew he represented traditional Judaism, not just liberal Judaism. At that point, the Roman Catholic priest, Father Michael Nosita, said, Dennis, may I answer the caller? He said, please, Father, go ahead. He said, caller, I'm the Roman Catholic priest, Father Michael Nosita. God chose the Jews. Get a life. I thought, I'm ending, I thought that was the most eloquent response. And I will tell you one other final thing. May I? Okay. Not only did the Christians often on that show come to bail out the rabbi, but very often I came to bail out the Christians. It was a very touching thing for me. One caller once called and started laughing at the priest and the minister about God coming as a human being on earth. And I said to the guy, I said, you know, that's not my faith, but I don't know why exactly you're laughing at the idea that God wanted to suffer with suffering humanity. I kind of find the idea pretty morally impressive. And the guy shut up, just like the guy who was told, get a life. The lesson in all this, God's involved in all this, and we Jews and you Christians, we need each other. Because I can't imagine a more powerful force on earth than Jews and Christians united. Thank you very much.
Well done.
Thank you, sir.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you.